Hello students, welcome to EPG Patashala. I am Dr. Basav Jirle from Banaras Hindu University. Today we will be discussing about a module on dimensions of agricultural extension from paper on concept and dimensions of extension education. The objective of this particular module is to understand the 10 different dimensions of extension education. When we come across the term dimension per se connotes size, scope and magnitude of something. The term dimension also having the connotation of measurement. Is it that are we measuring extension? Can we measure extension like any other things like a table with its length, breadth, width, so on and so forth, or synonymously extension is also having certain dimensions which helps us to understand the concept of extension. After understanding these dimensions, if you want to practice, sky is the only limit. So, the understanding of these dimensions is going to broaden the mental horizon of each one of us. Now, coming to the dimensions of extension, Mishra in the year 1990 analyzed about 40 dimensions over a period of 1953 to 1989. So, through the process of research, he culled out the following 10 dimensions of extension. Every dimension has an input for extension professional for practice and for developing it as a discipline. Coming to the dimensions of extension. The first dimension listed is the altruistic dimension. What do we mean by altruism? Altruism concerns about being kind-hearted to others. It is not that we need to show sympathy, but we need to empathize the issue. What is the difference between sympathy and empathy? Sympathy means we are expressing our pityness for the issue that had happened. It does not work all the time. And just by expressing your pityness and moving away from that particular point will not help in any point to the individual. Rather, in case of empathy or in case of empathization, we are putting ourselves into the role of others. We are precisely putting ourselves into the roles of others and visualizing the issue, and we are trying to feel that particular thing, and that is what is expected as a dimension of extension. So, when we analyze the issues related to extension, especially the pre-independence extension efforts, each and every individual launched various extension activities. Maybe it is localized, it is not having much coverage and it is not covering much individuals. Few villages were covered. With all these limitations, the people who developed this particular programs or who implemented this particular programs made an effort to empathize the problems of that section of the society, and that is how they developed these extension methodologies, especially the extension programs they planned and they implemented. The altruism is also emphasizing on the philanthropic approach, being philanthropic to the societal needs. What do we mean by philanthropy? So, when we look into the efforts of Rabindranath Tagore in the Shantiniketan experiment, wherein he spared some of his resources, especially the financial resources, he spared manpower, he spared everything. That is what is philanthropic approach. Almost all the extension efforts that were planned and implemented in the pre-independence era were having the philanthropic approach. Altruism emphasizes on the philanthropic approach. But is it that extension is needing all these types of help from the society? No. it depends on the individual. He felt that and he did that. Extension is not demanding, but this is one of the way of serving the needs of the society, and that is how we are discussing the concept of altruistic dimension of extension. Friends, in our first dimension, we saw regarding the concept of altruism and how altruism works for the development of extension. So with that background, so now we will move on to the educational dimension of extension. The moment we come across the term education, the definition of education, the simplest form of definition of education is, it is the process of bringing desirable changes in the human behavior. So the moment we try to understand this educational dimension, the first and foremost thing that comes to our mind is only the formal education or the school education that spans from the primary school to up to PhD education. Is it only the education? No. There are various other forms of education also. So whether you are getting education through formal or the non-formal education or informal education, it is going to add to this educational dimension. To some extent, the extension education makes use of the concept of formal education because extension is termed as a non-formal education. It is working under the framework of the formal education, but it has lots of flexibilities compared to the formal education. So making use of these the flexibilities of formal education, extension tries to impart various issues like the knowledge, skill and attitude among its clientele, and that is how it tries to bring about the desirable changes in the behavior of the clientele. Coming to the informal education, which is a continuous process or which is a lifelong process. Ramakrishna Paramahansa used to say, just to make us understand, education is a continuous process. As long as I live, so long as I learn. It means your learning process starts from your birth and it continues up to your death. The ultimate goal of educational dimension is bringing changes in the knowledge, skill and attitude of the people so that their mental horizon is broadened. So when we are talking of changes in the knowledge, the question comes into the picture is, can we transfer knowledge? If our answer to this question is yes, we are grossly mistaken. We cannot transfer the knowledge. We are transferring only the information. The receiver is going to translate this received pieces of information into his own knowledge. So that is what is his particular knowledge. So that is why in the one of the dimension that we are going to discuss, that is communication dimension, wherein we are emphasizing on establishing the common understanding between the source and the receiver. That is what is the meaning of knowledge dimension. Coming to the skill. So how best you can make use of your acquired information and how you are understanding a particular issue and translating it into knowledge. In the similar way, how best you can perform a particular aspect with your skills. It is the practical aspect wherein with your hands or with your verbal skills. So you have to express your accumulated knowledge for the benefit of the common man. And attitude is the mental predisposition of the individual for the stimulus. It has the previous experiences wherein you are trying to express your attitude. You are trying to express your attitude, and attitude varies from individual to individual, either it is in the positive way or in the negative way. So these three basic units of the components of the behavior is being learnt through the process of education, and through this we are going to broaden our mental horizon, and that is what the educational dimension of extension emphasizes upon. Coming to the communication dimension. Communication is the process of exchange of ideas, facts, feelings between two or more people so that commonness can be established among them about the issue under discussion. Hence, we say that communication should be consequential, persistent, smart, and direct. The success of communication is determined by the performance of the elements of communication in a satisfactory or the faithful manner. Over a period of time, there are a number of channels available for communication. The medium of communication is becoming more user-friendly every day. Print, electronic, and new media are playing greater role in making people aware of the happenings. The most effective way of communication is face-to-face communication. Is also possible irrespective of the physical separation of the source and receiver with the help of technological interventions. The basic idea of all these interfaces, whether it is face-to-face or taking the help of a technology to have the interface of face-to-face communication, is to establish the common understanding between the source and the receivers. Communication to be consequential, the message should have qualities. The code, content, and treatment of message play a key role in designing the message. What type of codes that we are generating and what type of treatment that we are giving. Treatment here means how we are simplifying the complex message. How we are simplifying the complex message. If the message is effective, then the role of other elements of communication becomes conspicuous. The person who delivers the message, who is identified as a source or sender of the message, has greater responsibilities of encoding the message in a way the receiver could decode. In the simple language, we say that what types of meanings that the source is attaching to the messages and how he is helping his receivers to understand the message. Because in case of communication, we say that the meanings are in people, not in words. The source is uttering certain words. That is what we say that encoding process. And receiver is getting those sounds and he is attaching certain meanings to those words that he has come across through receiver. The understandings he develops out of that process of attaching the meanings to these sentences or the words or the phrases or the paragraphs, so he develops his knowledge. That is where the role of the source become more conspicuous here. So how he is influencing the thought process of the receiver by giving appropriate inputs. We experience a high level of fidelity when there is low or no noise. The concept of fidelity, we say that faithful performance of all elements of communication. There are 5 basic elements: source, message, receiver, and channel, and the effect. The noise can happen at any point of time. Either the noise lies with the source or the noise lies with the message itself. The noise may lie with the channel. The noise may lie with the receiver or in the effect also. As the effect of this noise is less, the effect of the message is going to be enhanced. And that is why in case of communication, we say that high fidelity communication is expected with low levels of noise. If the noise is eliminated, the process of communication is going to be successful. If not, results are going to be vice versa. It means the process of communication is towards the process of failure because the listeners are not able to attach appropriate meanings because of this noise. Hence, elimination of noise becomes one important aspect of this communication dimension. Coming to the fourth dimension of extension, that is behavioral dimension. The behavioral dimension has direct relationship with the educational dimension. Behavior changes only through education, may it be formal, informal, or non-formal. In home science extension, changing the behavior of housewives becomes pivotal because the changes lead to acceptance of innovations. So how we are influencing them to accept these innovations, it may depend on the formal education with the help of the schooling system, or the non-formal education by using various extension methodologies, or in an informal way of learning by their own experiences. In any of these modes, they should accept the innovations. That is what is the primary need. Once there is modification in the behavior, then it's going to be a facilitator for extension initiatives. For all the developmental initiatives, positive changes in behavior is the basic. The components of behavior, namely knowledge, skill, and attitude, constitute the behavior of an individual. For developing knowledge, there is a prerequisite of development of information base. We don't get the knowledge from others. We get only the information from others. We translate the required information into knowledge by the process of understanding. If we have a wider information base, if it facilitates development of knowledge through understanding it. The extent of understanding of information leads to accumulation of knowledge. Skills are the practical way of performing an event assigned for. They are highly personal in nature. We may have enough information and it might have become our knowledge, but we might not have skills due to lack of practical exposure. Just to give an example, an individual who might be very good in the theory aspects of an automobile as an automobile engineer, but when it comes to its practical aspects, if his bike is facing any trouble in the midway, can an automobile engineer repair his own bike or a car or whatever the vehicle that he is riding? It becomes very difficult for him. But if you ask him to explain the theoretical aspects of a engine, so hours together he can give a lecture. But when it comes to its repair, he faces a lot of problems. Who can do the better repairing? Yes, there is a mechanic roadside. He never understands the theory aspects of an engine, but the moment he makes an effort to start the engine, he understands where exactly the problem lies, and he reaches that particular point. He makes the necessary repairs and then he hands over the vehicle. This is what is the basic difference between the theory and practice, the knowledge and the skill. You might be having enough knowledge, but having enough skills is also necessary when it comes to the extension initiatives. Attitude is the mental predisposition of an individual for the stimulus. The attitude may be favorable or unfavorable. Behavioral dimension emphasizes on favorable change in attitude in the positive direction. Favorable changes leads to the positive direction. When observe changes in these three components, then we can say that there is change in behavior, and that is what is the emphasis of the behavioral dimension of extension. in the previous dimension, which dealt with the technology, which is the outcome of the research process. Development of the technology involves good amount of research, not only at one place, at various places. It is not that one particular individual is conducting the research, it is good number of people in different parts and as a team that they are taking up this particular event. The research and extension processes are complementary to each other, because extension deals with the transfer of technology, the research deals with the development of the technology. The outcomes of the research gets meaning only when it is applied somewhere, and that is what we try to identify it as applied research or the outcomes of the applied sciences. There are good number of issues wherein we conduct the research and the outcomes of those researches becomes the input for the further research. Extension does not take into account for its transfer of technology purposes, because it still has a lot of scope for conducting the research. Coming to the applied research or the applied science aspect, it is not that not having any application, then it is a futile exercise. The applicable research that extension is in search of for the benefits of its clientele. The agriculture and home sciences are coming under the applied sciences, because all the things that they are dealing with, the technologies that they are dealing with, they are applied in nature. The outcomes of these processes should also have the component of application. In earlier part of our discussion, we talked about the feedback. So, what is the importance of feedback in conducting the research? So, because it strengthens the backward linkages with the clientele. So, that is what is the role of the feedback comes into the picture. So, when we talk of this research and when we talk of strengthening the backward linkages, for which we need to think of the forward linkages also with our clientele system. So, before coming to this backward and the forward linkages, now let us try to divide this the entire research dimension of extension into two different aspects. The first one, the research effort which is dealing with the development of the technology, and the second effort which extension research. So, the efforts that we are making for development of the technology, they are strengthening our forward linkages. When we disseminate that technology among the clientele, so whatever the input that what we get from the clientele, so that is going to be part of the improvement of the technology in involving the further researches. So, that is what is our backward linkages. So, to strengthen these backward linkages, the role of extension research comes into the picture. So, the research which has developed the technology involves all other disciplines which are coming under one umbrella of research for technology development. But extension research itself is a different discipline which provides methodological support for establishing these linkages with the clientele. So, time and again, when we conduct the research involving these technologies and when we make use of these technologies for the purpose of dissemination among the client system, whatever the feedback that we get from the various sections of the society, we try to consolidate, and that is what is the base of extension research. And with that feedback, extension develops the methodologies for transfer of technology. And that is how the research extension is developed as a discipline. Combining these two dimensions in one dimension, that is research dimension, wherein we are emphasizing on technology and we are emphasizing on methodological issues for the purpose of extension education. So, that is how the research dimension is coming into the picture. With this discussion, so now we will be moving on to the next dimension, that is input dimension. The seventh dimension of extension is the input dimension. May it be home science, agriculture, and any allied sciences of agriculture, inputs are essential. As there is change in technology, there is need for inputs. The latest technologies are more input intensive. For every production process or the enterprise, there is need for various types of inputs. Even though it becomes subjective to arrange the required inputs to all the clients, nevertheless, necessary intervention can be ensured for availability of inputs. When we discuss about inputs, most of the time we concentrate on tangible inputs. There are some intangible inputs which are very crucial, like appropriate information. In many of the production processes, we don't pay much attention to the information. Hence, we are facing a lot of constraints. The moment we have appropriate information, it has the potential of overcoming the problems of inputs. With all these inputs, we are successful in production process. The input dimension don't stop here. There is need for market information for getting the better price in the market. There are network projects of Indian Council of Agriculture Research on providing appropriate information on market, known as Network Project on Market Intelligence. The input dimension has unswearing relationship with the technology dimension. As there is change in technology, there is need for different types of inputs. It becomes the agency which has developed the technology to ensure availability of inputs, may it be information or the physical products. Timely availability of inputs can change the scenario, may it be commercial or non-commercial efforts also. Timely availability of inputs along with the information input can change the face of village, block, district, state, and the country also. This is how extension is giving due importance to the input, and it has developed a dimension on inputs. Cut. The eighth dimension of extension is professional dimension. People belonging to the other profession and aware of other professions have some difficulty in understanding the professional dimension of extension. First of all, how extension is a profession. Like other professionals, extension professionals are providing service. Like other professionals, extension professionals also have the potential of providing livelihoods to the people who accept it as a profession. The discipline of extension has its own subject matter to study, areas to conduct research, academic programs to teach, formally and non-formally. Hence, it is a well-established profession. Only thing needs is to understand it. Over a period of time, the concept of extension has been in use. Especially in the context of agriculture and allied sciences, the initial efforts were included providing all services free of cost along with the inputs. Even today, in many of the projects or programs, such practices are there. Hence, there are some misconceptions about extension, that extension means providing everything free of cost. If not, people will not accept it. Educational approach took backseat in approaches adopted in initial stages. The impression is still continuing, but the established governments have their own limitations. How long they can provide the things free of cost to the clients? There needs to be sharing of the cost. Hence, cost sharing approach of extension are coming up in a larger way. Cost sharing extension approach has similarities of a private medical practitioner. Whenever the client face problems, they go to a medical practitioner and get the solutions. They derive more satisfaction in the process than visiting a government hospital. Similarly, The public extension is also providing services free of cost, but slowly the private extension services are also in the offering. If you need specialized specific solution of a problem, service providers are there with cost sharing basis. Agri-clinics and agribusiness centers is one such scheme launched by Government of India, Ministry of Agriculture, successfully producing the practitioners throughout the country. As per the data available with the Manage Hyderabad, there are about 16,000 plus agri-clinics and agribusiness centers in operation throughout the country. This is a new facet added to the extension profession. The client system is slowly accepting the concept and professionals are self-sufficient and establishing themselves as agripreneurs. And that is how the extension as a profession is being proved slowly, and hence the concept of a professional dimension was introduced. The ninth dimension of extension is the income dimension. Out of the efforts done as per the advice of extension professionals, there should be change in income level. There will be change in income only when the advice delivered should include innovation. Communication of these innovations among the members of social system over a period of time is termed as diffusion. Since the innovations involve element of risk, the person who accepts the innovation may gain or there are some chances of losing also. As it is evident from earlier dimensions of extension that we are using research, technology and inputs, then the income is bound to follow. If income dimension is not achieved, something is wrong somewhere. Income plays an important role until and unless the farmer realizes there is change in income, he will not accept the technology per se. Hence, income is an important dimension of extension. The last but not the least dimension of extension is the management dimension. The concept of management can better be understood by dividing the term into three parts. The first one, manage, the management aspects. The second, man, means the human resources. And the third letter, the last letter, that is T, means technical as well as the technological inputs. Samantha in the year 1992 defined management of extension as the process by which people, technology, job tasks and other resources are combined and coordinated so as to effectively achieve extension objectives for agricultural development. It summarizes the concept of management, wherein resources are to be taken care of, may it be technical, human, material, financial, etc. Management aspects of extension become more meaningful when there were series of failures in extension processes. The appropriate interventions were sought. Then emerged the management dimension of extension. The first ever professional recognition of extension efforts was done through the training and visit program, wherein the concept of management, that is single line of command, reasonable span of management, professionalism of extension service, institutionalization of farmer extension research linkage, and monitoring and evaluation were brought in. Even after training and visit system, there were many state-level innovations adopted by different states incorporating management inputs for providing extension services. Later, in the year 1998, Atma model, that is Agricultural Technology Management Agency, was evolved with the management experts to bring transformation in agriculture and allied sciences. The Atma model, replicated throughout the country in the year 2006, is yielding the results of management innovations. Now, we have a unified platform to for the delivery of extension services. With a single window delivery of extension services, the end users are the real beneficiaries. These are nothing but the management inputs that were inculcated in the processes of extension. So that is why extension identifies management dimension as one of the key dimension. Okay friends, till now we were discussing about the various dimensions of extension. The discussion on these 10 dimensions of extension reveals the nature and scope of extension in a wider perspective. As we said in the beginning, it might have broadened your mental horizon as far as the concept of extension is considered. Many times we limit our understanding to transfer of technology. So that needs to be broadened through these efforts. But there are many issues associated with extension beyond the limited meaning of the term extension. An effort is being made to open up the boundaries of extension through these dimensions. Let me give an example. We cannot have a blanket technology for the whole country or for a whole state or for the entire state. May it be agriculture or may it be the home science or any science of that kind, especially in agriculture and allied sciences. For example, we can have a particular model of TV for which the consumers may be throughout the country or in some cases it may be throughout the world. But we cannot have a particular technology, may it be agriculture or home science, which is going to be common for different parts of the country or when we come to a particular state within the state itself. For example, you take the state of Uttar Pradesh. The technologies that are necessary for the eastern Uttar Pradesh are totally different from the western Uttar Pradesh. Definitely, the technologies that are required for northern parts of Karnataka are going to be totally different from the southern parts of Karnataka, because so there is change in the climate, there is change in the soil, there is change in the nature, there is change in the culture. All these aspects are going to add to the development of technology. So that is why we said that there cannot be a blanket technology, and that is what is the basic crux of extension, wherein we try to understand through these 10 different dimensions. The purpose of treatment of the message is to make understand the end user of the technology. So that is why we are adding value to the messages which are outcomes of the research, which we try to understand through the technology dimension or the research dimension. It is just like the difference between the reading of a newspaper and reading of a research paper. We can have the logic that both are the papers, but understanding the contents of a newspaper is comparatively easier than a research paper. Even a graduate student or a postgraduate student, it becomes difficult for them to understand the contents of a research paper if it is not falling under his domain. That is where the treatment of the information comes into the picture, and extension is an institution, extension is an organization, and extension is a concept which is taking up that particular issue of treatment of the message. Again, there is a need of extension intervention mentioned in the communication dimension, which is going to add value to the entire concept of these dimensions of extension education. With this process, I am sure you have understood the various dimensions, especially the 10 dimensions that we discussed under this particular module. Thank you.